Welcome to Professional Color Grading Techniques and Look Development inside of DaVinci Resolve. I'm Kevin P. McAuliffe. The focus in this course is primarily on higher-end color grading, color theory, and teaching techniques that took professional colorists years of experience to master. The main three concepts discussed in this course are advanced contrast management, balancing techniques, and look development. Now keep in mind that these concepts are closely interconnected and it is essential to master them to master the craft of color grading. You'll also learn the color theory you need to help you create unique and modern looks. If you want to follow along, the footage and projects used in this course are available for download. In this lesson, I want to get into the nuts and bolts of our color grading course by talking about the infamous S-curve. The S-curve is the key component in a log workflow and can be created automatically and manually. Let's dive into the basics. If you take a look at the waveform monitor and you take a look at our curves window, they're both represented by straight lines. We have incremental steps starting at complete black at 0 and basically going all the way through straight up in a perfectly linear fashion from complete black to complete white to give us a straight line. Whatever we do is going to be directly represented on our waveform monitor. All right, so I'm just going to reset that. I'm going to pull up like such. I'm going to pull down like such at the bottom, like that, to make our blacks look more black and our whites look more white. What I also have the ability to do is to come in and add editable splines. I can now finesse this however I want to finesse it, and what I've basically done now is drawn a basic S-curve. What we can now do to see it represented on a clip to see exactly the impact that an S-curve has on actual footage, we can simply copy the correction and paste it into the clip we are working on. And you'll already notice how much better our shot looks by adding contrast to it. Well, because our image is very flat, we're basically stretching the image out. All right, we're just going to reset. I'm going to come back to our gradient. I'm going to reset it there as well, because let's talk about the next way that we can add an S-curve to our footage. And that's using contrast and pivot, located right down here in the lower left-hand corner of the interface. All I'm going to do is grab the contrast value and dragging it out. And as you can see, we're now creating an S-curve, much like we had done before. Now, where pivot comes into play is that is what is going to impact exactly where the straight line portion of our curve is going to fall on our scope. So you'll notice if I take the pivot, drag it one way, it's going to move it one way. It's going to bring it back the other way. Now again, let's take a look at what this is going to look like in a practical example. Again, Command or Control and C. Let's just go back to our first shot here. All I'm going to do, again, much like I had done before, is paste that on. Boom. Take a look at now how much better the shot looks simply using contrast and pivot. Keep in mind at any time we can grab the pivot and we can adjust where that straight line of the curve is falling with a simple drag of the mouse. Now, last but certainly not least, let's add a technical LUT to our footage. Once again, we're simply going to come back here. I'm going to hide the clips now. So how does the LUT work? Very simply, I'm going to navigate right down here to our node. I'm going to right click, come down to LUTs. I'm going to come to 3D LUT, and we're going to choose the LUT that we're going to be coming back to throughout our course because we are working with log footage that was shot on an ARRI camera, and that's our ARRI Alexa Log C to Rec 709 technical lookup table. Now, as soon as I apply it, boom, you see there's our S-curve all ready to go. Let me take that, a simple paste, Command or Control and V. Take a look at now how our shot looks with the proper contrast added to it. Why would we use a LUT? Now, it can be a little bit difficult to shape that curve manually, especially if you're a beginner, as you saw in the first example. And you saw how things got progressively better from when I drew it to when I used contrast to when we work with the LUT. Now, what's also important to keep in mind is that the LUT contains a saturation matrix to basically give you the proper saturation in the image. All right? The saturation matrix is based on a bit more complex math, so you can expect a more sophisticated saturation than what you would get by simply raising the global saturation yourself. So the LUT is going to be a good starting point to work with most of the times right out of the box, or really right out of the click. Now there's some other reasons to work with LUTs, but we're going to talk about that later on. Let's remove this LUT from this shot. We're going to come back to our gradient. I'm just going to remove it from there as well. And let's right click on our node. I'm going to come down to LUTs, but this time instead of the technical LUT, I'm going to choose a creative LUT. And the creative LUT that I am going to choose is going to be a film look. And I'm going to choose the Rec 709 Kodak 2383 D65 LUT. Now, everything might seem like it's the same as it was before. I'm just going to add a parallel node here. The reason being is I want to be able to turn the node on and off. Let's just turn that node off. I'm now going to apply the same LUT that we had applied originally, which is our ARRI Alexa Log C to Rec 709. Now, we're also going to label this so we can keep track of it. I'll simply call it ARRI. Now, the first thing that I want to point out that's exceptionally important here is you'll notice that our curve here starts at perfect black, ends at perfect white. However, our film look doesn't do that. It may end almost at perfect white, but if you take a look down here, it doesn't end at perfect black. However, there's something more important going on here that we don't readily see if we don't have our scope set up correctly. What I'm going to do is just turn the scope settings back on, and instead of looking at the Y scope, which is strictly looking at luminance, I'm going to look at the RGB scope. Take a look at what has now just happened with our scope, taking a look at the film look LUT. You'll notice that our three channels are not exactly aligned together, which is what is going to be creating this different look. All right. Now I'm just going to leave the scope exactly the way that it is. I'm going to turn this node off and turn our technical LUT on. And you'll notice I haven't changed any of the settings. We're still dealing with the RGB scopes. I can turn off those channels. You'll notice nothing changes. Remember, all of our channels are aligned, so everything is going to fall into place. Not the same when we take a look at our film look. You'll notice that if I turn the channels on and off, we can exactly see what channel is the red channel, what channel is the green channel, and what channel is the blue channel. Now, with that being said, I want to mention that in this course, we're going to do all of our exposure and balancing corrections prior to the different LUTs that we are going to be adding. So we'll have our LUT on one node, and we'll always have another node before for our balancing and exposure before that node. And the results of our corrections are going to rely completely on the relationship between the individual color curves. But don't worry about that. It might sound a little bit technical, but we'll dive deeper into it later in this course.